So I'll just jump into this. We're going to get into language today. Language is super important for everything, obviously, that we're doing in artificial intelligence or computer science or in life. We're going to try to cover it in one class and a half. So obviously, we're not going to do it justice, but I'm going to focus on what I think is most important for the subject here. I want to remind you, if you haven't looked at the homework, most of the homework's associated with chapter 5 of the book. So the homework's due very soon. So hopefully you've had a chance to read over chapter 5. It might be one of the longer chapters. A lot of things that are covered, I think we touched on reinforced from some of the she kind of builds up to what she talks about there. The homework is due on Wednesday, and the exam, partial exam number 2, is a week from today. So the format's going to be similar. So I don't want you all to try to have to do everything in class, which you can probably do. But I'm going to give you the things that require a little bit more thought ahead of time, like I did last time. And then the part in class should be more straightforward. And that'll be up on by Thursday, before end of Thursday, the take-home part. Today we're going to cover language, building blocks of language, talk about why human language is ambiguous, and talk about word associations. So the first part is, what is a language? This is one of those times in class where I'm going to ask you what a language is. So what, in your words, is a language? Yes?
Language is the reflection of the human thoughts.
Reflection of human thoughts. That is very deep. Yes? A style? A tool? A tool for what? To communicate. So a reflection of human thought, a style of communicating, and a tool to communicate. That's what I have so far. Yes?
It's a system of rules and signs.
System of rules and signs. Okay. Anything else? It's a reflection of human thought, a style of communicating, a tool to communicate, and a system of rules and signs. How often do we use language? So this isn't something new. You've thought about this, and it's a reflection of human thought, style of communicating, tool to communicate, and a system of rules and signs. Anything missing? All right, so now a little bit more functional. What are languages used for? What's language used for? What do people use languages for? Communication. Communicate with what? You said communication? You said communication? To communicate just generally? Communicate with others. Others, okay. So communicate with others. What else?
To make reference of things in the world and environment.
To make reference. Make reference of things in world and environment. Anything else? We got to communicate with others and make reference of things in the world and the environment.
Use language to create concepts.
To create concepts. I put useful for creation of concepts. Communicate with others, make reference of things in world and environment, and useful for creation of concepts. Anything else? So here's a definition you can look up in the slides, just from the Webster Online. It says that they are, so this is multiple definitions. Definition 1A, the words, their pronunciation, and the methods of combining them used and understood by a community. That's definition A. I guess if you were the only person in the world, would language still be useful for you? Someone said, yeah.
To preserve history.
Preserve history. You write stuff down to remember for yourself, or someone else who may come by in the future. Yeah. Another idea? Why?
To differentiate things. For example, if you see animal, you know, they're gonna give it a name and I'm trying to differentiate from other animals.
Right. Good. So for your own use, even if you weren't communicating. Some of the other definitions, B1 says audible, articulate, meaningful sound as produced by the action of vocal organs. It's basically saying voice. Yeah, I understand that definition. B2 says a systematic means of communicating ideas or feelings by the use of signs, sounds, gestures, or marks having understood meanings. It goes on to say the suggestions of objects, actions, or conditions, the means by which animals communicate. A formal system of signs and symbols, such as, and it really says Fortran. Y'all know what Fortran is? Is that a thing anymore? It's a computer language, but it's really old. Or calculus and logic, including rules for the formation and transformation of admissible expressions. And the last one there says is machine language. So I jotted down 5 that aren't really consistent with what you said. I maybe just broke them down into a little more categories. So where you said communicate with others, I separated that out into a few different subcategories. So one I have interhuman communications, which is communicate with others who are human beings. I have a second one, which is interspecies communication. Talk to your dog. And those of you who don't have pets, dogs can learn a certain amount of language so that they can at least sit when one sit and come and a little bit. They can tend to learn their names. And some of them can learn how much time you spend teaching them. They can communicate with us. Sometimes not more effectively than a baby can. At least they can let us know that something's going on. I don't have this, but I know people who have pets for a very long time can learn to distinguish more about what they're trying to communicate. So a bark is not a bark, it's not a bark. Human-computer communication, so these are languages that we use to program computers, or it can be language simply where the computer is telling us what the result of the program is, where we're given computer input. So those I put into separate ones. And then the last form of communication, I just called it self-communication, what you were talking about, which is talking to yourself. But it's also related to remembering, so assigning concepts to things so that we can more easily recall them back, and to thinking. A lot of us use language, most of us use language, but not all of us use anything as we think about things. In a prior class, we had talked about intervals. Some people use intervals to think. Next class, I'll talk about an example of a very well-known scientist who described the way they think and describe the primary way they think doesn't use it. So we can see that at least some examples of people who don't, quote, talk to themselves have found some benefit in avoiding talking to themselves. We can talk about next time why that might be. Okay, so that's just sort of a general introduction of what we mean and what I mean when I'm talking about language. You can see why that's pretty fundamental in terms of human systems, but also in terms of artificial systems in order to be able to get information in and out. And I mean language generally in terms of it could be spoken language, voice language, but also just be instruction that you're given to a computer or information that you're receiving back. Now we'll talk about the building blocks of language. Here I'm more talking about humans from a human perspective. And I broke it down here into 5 different categories. The first one is written versus read. They do not be read like red, blue, yellow. Read, R-E-A-D, sounds the same but different meaning. Written, read. In some forms you can write languages by hand, so you can get a pen and paper and write things down. You can type it on a keyboard like this. More so now, we more regularly touch it, which is kind of a weird thing. But when you touch the screen, there's really not a keyboard there. It's just something that the screen is projecting. So you have sort of a contract with the screen and the operating system in there that says if you touch in a certain area, it's going to interpret that as a symbol, whatever symbol it displays. To the extent it doesn't, then when you touch, it's actually going to input that into the system. And then it can be printed. It can be printed on paper. It can be printed, on a computer screen. When I say printed, I'm using the most general sense of the word. How do we read it? It could be read by sight, so you can see it. It could also be read by touch. Right, so if you print raised patterns, or if you print raised letters, you can learn how to touch them or rub them and read in that way. So different types of ways we can do that. We can also do things acoustically. We have sounds that we can say by my mouth. Next time we'll go through in some slides and stuff a little bit more about how that happens, how you get air from your lungs to go through your throat and come out your mouth in a way that you can actually understand very intricate particulars of what someone is saying. So we'll show some things about that, sort of the inverse of what we talked about before in hearing. And then you can, whether you say things by mouth or you can sometimes tap things out, right? Or make sounds in other ways to communicate to things. I used to have a high school chemistry teacher who, the way he said, "I want your attention," is he would draw a large metal object on the ground and make a really excruciating sound. That was his, "Hey, I want your attention." So that worked. I still remember it today, so I won't use that on you. So that's sort of traditionally what we think about from language, but other forms of we can communicate is through touch. Right? Sometimes we might get someone's attention because we don't necessarily want to get everybody's attention, so we might touch them, or we might point to them, right, to communicate, or we might hold something up, or we can maybe even mouth things which would be sight, but you can also touch people in different ways to get their attention. It's not as effective, right? But you can imagine that it could be. If you couldn't speak with your mouth, or you couldn't see with your eyes, and you lived a lifetime you might imagine that you might actually invest a lot of time in learning how to communicate with your touch. And then smells is another one. For me, I could tell when dinner was going to be ready because of the smells that were going through the house. And a lot of times I couldn't even tell what dinner was going to be. So, and then there's flavors and tastes, which I'm not sure, but I've done some things, at least on a limited basis, where I've tried to communicate some things with flavors. Imagine it's not the most efficient language. But you can envision developing a language of words, if you will, of concepts associated with smells or tastes. It's just maybe a little bit harder to figure out how to manipulate those things. So now the building blocks of written language, and I've got two things on here, letters and marks. And we can debate in a little bit whether or not that's everything. But just in terms of things that you write down, there's letters and marks. With letters and marks, you can communicate a lot. If you look at the complete works of Shakespeare, they're written with letters and marks. And I'm using marks in a general sense. It could be an accent mark, it could be a punctuation mark, it could be other shapes of marks. To me, that's pretty amazing. So if you remember the quote that I put in the front, right? Create meaning with something that's meaningless. Just take some letters that, themselves don't mean anything. Put them together, and now you've created something that shouldn't mean anything, except we ascribe a concept to it. Right? As long as the concept we ascribe to this word is similar to the concept that someone else ascribes to the word, then we can communicate. Interestingly enough, if it's similar but not exact, we still communicate, we just communicate poorly. And so the concept that I create is similar to the concept that you create, and I say, hey, I'm feeling disgruntled, and for you, disgruntled means I'm feeling mad, then you've sort of understood what I'm saying, but in a way you didn't really understand what I said, because if you don't know that word, you might know enough about that word to think you know what I said, but not know it. So very quickly, language can be a very dangerous thing, because sometimes it's better to not understand what someone's saying, because then you don't miscommunicate, right? Than to think you understand what someone said, but in fact not really understand what they were trying to do. So letters and marks. Anything I'm missing other than letters and marks for written communication?
Gestures.
What do you call it?
Gestures.
Gestures. Which would be more for, I guess I don't know what that would be. It would be for more in-presence communication. As far as written, the only two I could think of was, which are relatively new, are emoticons. I had that on the last test. I actually did, in preparation for your next homework, I did a study on looking at the frequency of emoticon use versus the frequency of text usage in a bunch of different chat groups, basically. Seeing how often people use words versus emoticons. And it was fairly significant, actually. It was hard to go through a lot of written text without a fair number of emoticons. And this is for people that are in their 30s and 40s. I would imagine it would be even more for people that are younger. And then another one that is fairly popular now, which I wouldn't consider to be a mark or a letter, is a GIF. Or GIF. Is it GIF? So GIF. So who is there anyone here that does not ever use an emoticon when they're chatting with somebody. I held out for a long time, but I now also use it. Does anybody never has ever used a GIF? I think GIFs are actually underrated. If you think about communications with letters and words, and communication with a GIF, I mean, to me, it's just at a higher level of communication. If you pick the right GIF. I have not tried that yet. A full-time conversation with GIFs.
She really uses it very often. WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook.
So it's interesting how language, continues to evolve, and I think actually in some respects gets a little bit better. All right, has anybody ever heard of the infinite monkey theorem? So basically it goes like this. If you had enough monkeys and enough time, and back then it was a typewriter, but you could do a keyboard, then they could write out, at some point they would write out the complete works of Shakespeare. Because the complete works of Shakespeare, just a bunch of combinations of letters and spaces. You ever heard anything comparable to that? Kind of makes sense? Or? So it's actually theoretically possible. Practically, the probabilities go down very, very, very quickly. So people have looked at it, and there's, I forget the guy's name, famous guy, and he has a number. And presumably, if you go like throughout the whole universe, count up all the atoms, all the things that could possibly exist, like this, you can't go above this number. So part of the way people counter the monkey theorem is to say like there's not enough space in the universe to have enough monkeys, and not enough time if you look at all the time the universe has existed to even come close to like typing out the works of Shakespeare. But if you want to know the math, and sometimes I like to put a little math on the home stuff, not real complicated math. But it basically goes like this. If you had a keypad, if the complete works were 30 characters, let's throw out 30 characters. Let's say it's in English. Common English where we're using 26 for A through Z. And then we have commas, periods, exclamation points, and spaces. So that would be 29 or 30. So if you do 30, because they're doing it totally randomly and they're not using anything up, then each letter, the chances they're going to type in a certain letter is 1 out of 30. And the chances they're going to type the 2 letters that you want in a row is 30 times. So basically, if you were going to do artificial intelligence counting the space as a character, you would have to multiply 30 times 30 times 30, 23 times. And there, I think even from your desks in the font that I have, you can see that this is a really big number here at the bottom. But basically, even just to type out a small little phrase, as small as artificial intelligence, would be virtually impossible to do that randomly. Now, you could construct an algorithm, all of you hadn't already done your proposals, where you could try to see how long it takes you to create the phrase artificial intelligence randomly, right? Because you don't need monkeys now. You can create a virtual monkey to randomly type things, and then you can have a little recognition phrase just sitting there waiting for the words artificial intelligence to come out together to see actually how long that would take. Or you can figure out that you're going to need a more clever algorithm than randomness to figure out how to do it, which you could do, by the way. You could improve on this a lot by, when you type in a first letter, if the first letter is not A, not worry about typing out the rest of the letters. Right? So there are some things you can do here if you wanted to create an algorithm that is truly random, but in an intelligent way, randomly went to create, some work. I show you this just to show you the power of just what a few letters basically in symbols can do, and how constructing something actually fairly, what seems like fairly straightforward, is actually not straightforward to do it unless you use some script to do it. All right, I have this story here, and this would be much better if I was on up here. But basically, the story says, and I put it in Spanish just because I could. It says, era una tarde ventosa. Is that how you say windy? Sounds weird. Ventosa y lluviosa cuando se fue la luz. Le pedimos a un amigo que nos contara una historia. Y esta es la historia que el amigo nos contó. Ready? Era una tarde ventosa y lluviosa cuando se fue la luz. Le pedimos, you get the point, maybe. So language is recursive. Not only can you take letters that are meaningless, right, and create meaning from them very quickly by putting a B and an E together, and now it's a B. But not B like a B and an E and an E. That's something totally different. Right? But you can also construct a concept and build concepts around concepts. If you've done computer programming, which you have at least at the entry level, there's going to be a lot more. You know that's a pretty powerful tool. You say, define an I and do an XI, and back in the old days, you do into whatever it is. You don't have to write a lot of code to get something to sort of repeat itself. That's one of the super nice things about programming. Language, so what we mean by this, language is recursive. And this is the definition of recursive is, if you still don't get it, the definition of recursion is, if you still don't get it, see recursion. I think you get it. All right, human language is also inherently ambiguous. That's what we're going to talk about next. This loses a little bit of its effect if I read it, so I'm not going to. Can you read it from there? I'll bring it around. You guys have plugged in the computers? So just, I'm going to ask you a question about it. So this is grammatically correct. I'm not going to show you anything, but what did you read? What? There's an elephant wearing my pajamas. That's exactly right. And you can read it two ways. You could read it that there was a morning and you saw an elephant in your pajamas, that you were in your pajamas. Or you can read it that one morning you saw an elephant in your pajamas. And both of them are okay. Right? Context normally would have someone think that you were in your pajamas and you saw an elephant. So that's kind of the joke here, because the next phrase says, how he got into my pajamas, I'll never know. So that's part of the concept. This one is a little bit tougher. So I'm going to show you this going around. This is grammatically correct. It only took me about 20 minutes to figure it out and believe that it is actually. I made this one up, but I adapted it from someone else. So it's grammatically correct, and albeit stylistically challenged. Like it's not the simplest sentence to read. We're going to try to help you read this sentence. And like I said, it took me really 20 minutes to be able to read the sentence. So, but I'm going to give you 3 facts. The mouse ate the cheese. The cat killed the mouse. And the dog chased the cat. When you think you can read the sentence and it makes sense that way, let me know.
Because I think because you take a fraction, like the dog shapes, then you expand on that, taking away that fragment. The cat killed, take those away, and the mouse ate the cheese.
That's exactly right. Now, when you read that, can you read it now to yourself and read it in a way that it comes out, or not yet?
What?
When you read, just read the sentence to yourself. When you read it, are you able to read it to yourself in a way that those 3 things that are happening stand out to you? Just think about it. I wasn't able to for 20 minutes, and I'm probably not going to do it now because I probably forgot. So just look at it one more time. So I'll show you here now. Here's what I did. So I'll share it with you there. This was the nesting that he's talking about. Right? So if we were writing a program, that would kind of make a little bit more sense. So you can start with the in parentheses red that says the cat killed, because that's what the cat did. The cat killed. And then I have it there now nested because it's the cat killed still in red. But now in green, in parentheses, I'm showing that which cat is it? It's the cat the dog chased. That's the one that did the killing. Does that help you get to the last sentence? Now read the whole sentence again and see if that helps. If it does, you're better off than me because I still couldn't do it. I understood the concept. I still just couldn't. It was hard for me to read the sentence and believe that I was reading it correctly to preserve those concepts, right? Because you want to have little pauses and things when you communicate based on what's happening. So I did one more thing. I did it this way. I said, the cat the dog chased killed. So instead of the nesting, I just kind of pulled that out because that was a concept that was in the middle that I felt like I could get my brain around. And then the other concept I could get my brain around was that the mouse ... ate the cheese. This finally helped me get it so that I could at least say it a few times in a way that didn't sound weird. So what does it actually say? If it's the cat the dog chased killed, that's the concept, and then the mouse ate the cheese. So the mouse, the cat the dog chased killed, ate the cheese. So if you see a sentence like that on a test or something, you have to kind of parse it out, right? That's basically what we do. And this is just an example to show that in language, we do parse things out, but generally we don't tend to communicate in phrases that are this long. And when they are that long, you can imagine that someone might not be able to parse it out correctly when you say that phrase. So they may not be able to get these 3 concepts. And that's why when we communicate, even though this is grammatically correct, it may be better to communicate in separate sentences, basically, or structures, to make sure that the concepts that you want to communicate are being appropriately translated. Okay, so now I have one here that I left for you to fill out with me here. So now we're going to talk about computer language specifically. I just talked about letters and words and written language. and how a bunch of monkeys still couldn't type out Shakespeare stuff. It's pretty complicated. And how once we do get words and concepts, we can put them together to create other concepts. And we can do that recursively, or we can put a lot of concepts together actually in just one sentence. So it's confusing. So if we talk about human language, it's no wonder that like sometimes I think like people are always fighting each other in the world because even if they wanted to like communicate, like it's pretty hard thing to do. So are computer languages better? Are they easier to communicate? Is it easier to communicate with a computer than it is with another human? And what are some of the characteristics? Okay.
It's not easier. It's specific.
So computer, I'm going to put here that they are more specific. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Specific in the sense that the program not work a lot for us. For example, programmers who have said to the developer, go to the store, get a local bread. Their fast pick up dozen. For us, you know, that doesn't use a dozen egg. What that means is it's going to take a dozen loaves of bread. So you have to be specific on the typing so that you correctly interpret what you're trying to do.
So maybe a more specific rule set. It sounds like kind of what you're saying. What else? It doesn't have to be. It could be things that are the same. Syntax. Syntax more specific also.
It's not more specific, is that it's created because it's like whenever we're saying it's like how these signs and what place there and all the goals to what you're trying to learn to program. So it's not like language that even if you have something wrong in the syntax, you can make it interpret what the person is trying to say.
Right. Okay. So you have some instructions, and I'm just going to put here, just unless you can think of a better word, just that they're vigorous or rigid, maybe. So that could be a good or a bad thing, right? If you're trying to program, if you're trying to write a program and you misspell your instruction, or you use an instruction that's not in the library, is your program going to run and just guess as to what it thinks that you meant by that instruction? Or is it not going to compile, or is it going to basically give you an error and say, hey, I don't know what that word is? Yeah, what? Might be obvious, right? It might be obvious, or you might think it's obvious. And so in some ways, the rigidity of the computer and its rules doesn't allow you really much freedom to sort of bend the rules. Right? Because if you bend the rules, it's just not going to understand what it is you want. What's the worst case scenario in computer programming? Say it again.
That your program blows up a bunch of pieces in that sense of the word.
That definitely is a bad scenario for me. It's when you use the wrong instruction, and that instruction actually exists.
I mean, yeah, because the computer's not going to complain because it's still doing what you tell it to do. So
Right.
you tell it to do a certain thing. For us, it's going to be that because the instruction for us is not what we want. And for the computer, since it runs,
It's going to run.
why not?
And there are some words that are actually very similar in some programming language, especially now, that don't actually do like the same thing. Sometimes they actually do things that are fairly close to each other. It's very important. But at least, so you can still go wrong, but in human language, sometimes you can go really wrong because you don't necessarily get that immediate feedback. But it could be a good thing, which is what you were saying, because sometimes my wife and I have been together now for 11 years. And oftentimes, I say something that's just not even right, but she knows exactly what I meant to say. I might say, did you turn the stove off? Like maybe that's what I meant to say, but I said, did you leave the lights on and whatever, But she knows, for whatever reason, that what I really was trying to say. And I don't actually have to say it. You might get a little chuckle out of it, but I don't actually have to say it. But does she really know? She really doesn't know. Right? It's just probabilistically, she's pretty sure what I really meant to say, especially if I said words backwards. Right? Like, did you turn off the stove, or did your stove turn off, or something like that? She knows what I meant to say, even though I broke the rules, right? So in some respects, computer language is actually a good thing in the sense that it's more rigid. Then the question is, can you make something that's that rigid creative? I think you can to a point, right? Because you can create computer programs that create pretty awesome things. And you can certainly create new words, and you can create new instructions based on previous instructions. So would that solve, if we started all over again and throughout the English language and the Spanish language and every other language, and just started with a blank piece of paper or a whiteboard, could we construct a language that humans could use that was not ambiguous? And if so, should we do that? So that's the question. Can we make, could we make an unambiguous language?
First, we can create a language because language is not a human invention. A language naturally occurs from us. So all the language that we know is because there is a mental structure inside our minds called universal drama. So even if we are on blank slates, we have that universal drama that guide us to know all the rules that connect all languages. So there are tries of people trying to create language, but they fail because they don't properly refer to things as the natural language do.
That brings in a concept that's way beyond the scope of our class today. What I would say to that is that not even Noam Chomsky completely agrees with what you just said. And he's one of the espoused creators of universal grammar. But there is some theories that the mind is set up, basically what he's saying is there are some theories that the mind is set up in a certain way, and that regardless of the words that you use, that you're going to end up, basically running into sort of the same pitfalls. There was a movie, I think it was called Contact, not too long ago, where someone who, a scientist who kind of believes in this theory, was brought in to basically communicate with aliens. And then realized, well, wait a minute, this theory, even if it is true, doesn't necessarily apply to aliens because we don't know what their mind structure is going to look like. And so there's some interesting sort of subtleties around language. To me, it kind of brings up some of the debate, like is our emotions innate and programmed in, or do we construct them? And if we do construct them, does it matter because are we still going to feel them regardless of whether our brain tells us not to? Right? Kind of like what we were seeing the other day, where I told you the dots weren't going to move, but you still see them, right? So if you know that you shouldn't feel bad about something, are you still going to feel bad about it or not? But usually, a lot of times we do feel bad about it. We know we shouldn't feel bad. So I think you can, that's one explanation for sure. Another explanation, without just going into the theories, is just go back into the probabilities we talked about, just in creating a simple word. So as soon as you start creating words and agreeing, right, the world's a continuous world. We live in a continuous world. Even if I agreed on all the colors with HTML codes, right, there might be a reason why someone wants to talk about colors in between HTML codes. Right? So now I've got to create something else. So because of the number of variables, and the fact that the world that we live in anyway is continuous, you can see how you could, it would be hard to communicate things we want to communicate. But it could be done if we all agreed that there's just certain things we want them to talk about. We don't have words for it, or we're doing it. But I don't know how to do it practically. I don't have the answer to it. It's something to think about. Okay, we're going to talk about word association next, and that's where we're going to end. So we're actually good on time still. I went through things a little bit faster than I normally would have. So please look at the slides. And I put in here the feedback that I got from the class. So word association is partly what we use to communicate. Right? Because we hear words and we try to associate them with at least their understanding. What we have is an understanding of what that word is. But then oftentimes we have concepts we want to communicate in response to a concept that someone communicates to us. So we use the words to look up things, like their meanings, so we understand what they're saying, but then we also use those words to maybe look up concepts that are related in some way. And in this slide, in the next slide, we'll talk about what those things are. But one basic thing is, that's basically it. And then sometimes words, we categorize words. We're going to read about this in Dr. Feldman's book if you haven't already. What we don't want to think is that a word, the way we understand words, have fluid categorization. What that means is that anything like a desk, it can be a desk, or it can be something you stand on, or something that's high. It can change. Or it can be an example of this wonderful amazing color. Right? The house is colored. This desk would be an example of this. But I don't know actually what it was. Or it could be an example of oxidation. So things that oxidize, desks or some things that oxidize if they have metal. So that also makes the creation, because we can think in these abstract ways and fluid ways and agree on it, right? If we agreed that desk was money, it'd be hard to carry it around to storing stuff and music with things. Theoretically, it could be, but it's done all the time. There are some communities that actually, where that would be essentially money, because there's a craft person that makes furniture, and they use that furniture to exchange for food, or housing or something like that. So we use it as a way to barter. So 3 basic ways that you associate based on classifications. One's similarity, how similar the word is or the concept is to another concept. The other is the exact opposite, which is how much it contrasts, how different it is. You might remember when we saw the Puerto Rican flag change colors. That's sort of built into our senses in our brain. Especially we saw the opposite color when we removed one of the stimulus. So those are heavily associated in our brain. And then the other one is contiguity, which basically means there are things that are close in space or in time. So in time, meaning things that we talked about in this class, sometimes I'll bring up a reference to it. It might be a subtle reference, but I feel like you know what the reference is because I know that we just talked about it in class. If I made the same reference a week from now, you probably wouldn't get it, unless it was something that we really spent a lot of time in. Okay, so word association was something that actually people spent a lot of time using it to try to understand how the brain And the idea is if I give you a concept and it causes you to think about something, if I don't give you a lot of time and I say, what's the first thing that comes to your head, and I give you a bunch of concepts, which can be as simple as words, then at some point you're just going to be giving words that have nothing to do really with where we are and what we're doing. Especially if the words I give you are something that's really not associated with this at all. Right? If I just happen to say Africa, but probably not a lot to do with Africa here, except Africa has elephants, and you didn't think about elephants, did you? So, yeah. Remember that game we talked about earlier, right? We talked about elephants today, too, in pajamas. So there's a pretty good chance when I said Africa, you didn't think about pajamas. But there's a guy named Freud, and a lot of people after him. Carl Jung is one who was a Freud student. He said, you know what, if people are just giving me words, if I give them enough words and they don't actually have to do with things that are happening here, they're going to start coming from things that that person experienced. And the idea was I can maybe start to get a hint as to what's going on inside that person's brain that they're not even conscious about. So we can try this here. This is the last thing we're going to do in the class today. If you're looking at this online, do not participate. Because I forgot this was on. But, so do not participate. But I need a volunteer who's not looking at it online. Is everybody looking online? Did everybody look? Did you look? Okay, good. You're my volunteer. Okay, it's very simple. I'm going to give you 5 words in English, and you're going to give me the first word that comes to your mind. These are going to be in English. You can answer in Spanish. Yes. Whatever word you want. But remember, the idea here is not to think about it. Or not to think about it. Just word that comes to mind. You don't have to filter it. If you think of a bad word, we're all adults here. It's okay. And we're not going to use this to figure out your psychological makeup. Okay, so the first thing that we're supposed to do is time it. Let's see if I can get a timer out very quickly. Part of the timing, well, I'll explain how it all works. Basically, I'm going to give you one word. When I give you the word, I'm going to start the timer. And then when you give me the word back, I'm going to stop the timer, and then I'm going to write down what you say. Cool? All right. No judging. This is a judge-free zone. Okay. Here we go. Piano. Box. What? Money. Green. Child. Yeah. Family. Yeah. So dad or dad? Okay. So I'm going to play a little video.